Okay, we're back. This coffee break for Argentina is lunchtime. But right now we're going to have a very interesting panel. If it weren't for all these virtual online tools, many things during the pandemic wouldn't have had existed, like electronic signature, virtual meetings, Zoom, so many things. But especially these elements that have to do with certification, digital entity, electronic signature, e-files, everything that allow us to continue with the formalities within our work in corporations, in the public state, and in doing business with individuals. We're going to review the present regulations and what is the situation in Latin America. So we're going to invite three friends of ours.
Hurtado, ella es especialista en Derecho de las Nuevas Tecnologías, ella está en Panamá. Hola, querida.
Katiuska is in Panama.
Amigos que están en México. Extraño mucho Panamá.
And I have two friends in Mexico. I am missing Panama and Mexico. You know how much I love those countries. Jaime Díaz Limon, director of Mexico, and my friend Alfredo Reyes Krafft from Informática, Mexico. Alfredo is a friend from many years. Katiuska and Jaime are the new friends that we have here in the school. I miss you all. I miss meeting with you, going to Panama and to Mexico to eat delicious things and to share some time. I remember the other day, Alfredo, when we ate chili. Yes, it's in a specific time of the year. We have to do it often. Seeing each other once a year is not enough, Olga. Yes, the same for Jaime and Katiuska. I don't know, Jaime, if we met in person. Mexico 2019, no, right? No, we didn't meet. It was the first time we had contact, but we didn't meet in person. We have to do it. We have to go and have breakfast. Yes, those Mexican breakfasts. In Argentina, breakfast is not so important as in Mexico. It's like coffee with a little bit of milk and some croissants. But in Mexico, breakfast is huge. I'm not going to talk about products because I may make a mistake, but I know that you're going to love it. I don't remember the name of the place, Los Álamos. It was a huge house, and there were families having breakfast, and it was incredible. I miss also Panama. We have always had such a great time there in all our meetings. So, Katiuska, I met you in person in Washington, right? Face-to-face in Washington, in the school. I have Adrian here with me. He is going to say hello to you also.
I don't have a microphone, but big hugs and greetings for all of you. Thank you very much, Adrian. Greetings for you too, okay? It's a great thing to see you here once again. Good. Hopefully everybody's okay. I know that Jaime was kind of sick, but I think that you have recovered. Okay, I leave the panel to Alfredo, Jaime, and Katiuska. First and foremost, I would like to say hi to the more than 500 students of the South School of Internet Governance Edition 2021. And for those followers that follow or are staying tuned in YouTube and Facebook, hopefully you are have your batteries recharged for these two important speakers that are going to be very interesting. I would like to reiterate my acknowledgments to Olga, Adrian, and to the South School on Internet Governance for having invited us to take part in this panel with two excellent authorities on the matter that are going to be discussing electronic signature, digital signature, regional implementation, and regional regulations. Because I cannot read the resumes, imagine so many conferences that they taught and all of that. But let me tell you that the CVs are posted in the website. However, I would like to introduce these two people that are here with us today. We are going to have Jaime Díaz Limon, who is a digital lawyer specialized in these topics and president of the National Security of Mexico. Alfredo Reyes Krafft is a lawyer and is the director of Informática. To give you a snapshot, let me tell you that it is important to understand that for this year, for 2021, Internet users increased to 4.2 billion, is 60% of the world's population. As a result of the pandemic, all the actions or anything that we have done that revolve around the internet increase exponentially. Everything that has to do with work, commercial, trade, professional topics, or entrepreneurship. This makes us worry about security and all those operations that we perform over the internet, and we need to have legal certainty of the identification or the way we identify with people or relate with people. And here, the digital signature becomes relevant. So we are going to have two main objectives with this panel. First, to understand the technical legal aspects of digital signature and to acknowledge the difference between the types of signatures and its uses in line with our legislation, focusing primarily on Latin America and the Caribbean, and also the probatory evidence after these acts or after signing. Okay, we'll turn over to Jaime Díaz Limon, that is going to touch upon the concepts and the emergence of digital signature, the standards that revolve around it, and what is it like in terms of electronic notary publics, and how this is evolving. Jaime, over to you. So you can address the South School of Internet Governance 2021. It's an honor and privilege to be discussing this topic in these spaces that is renowned in the academic world in terms of internet governance and building the South School and in strengthening digital citizens' rights. A year ago, I wanted to be a moderator in one of these spaces, and Olga Cavalli, responsible for the South School of Internet Governance, invited me to moderate the panel. And right now they give me a second chance to participate with the larger dream that is to be part of these panelists, together with a friend of mine and my teacher, because my PhD thesis as a basis, I was referring to his book. I got to know his book, to read his book, and right now I am sharing the conference with you, and as well as some other academic spaces. So greetings to all the remote people that are listening to us, and Katiuska that is here with us today. I would like to share my screen. Yes. Thank you very much. We are going to address digital signature, national and regional regulations having a Latin American approach. For me, it is important to point out that there are substantive perceptions or definition-like perceptions and some approaches in the way we have to see some digital signatures that seemingly seek its resemblance, and they mislead consumers or the average consumer. And also, I would like to address some case studies as advanced digital signature in order to authenticate the identity and the person and the owner's content of a document in the strict sense of the word. And please allow me to present some of the cases or the way we are going to evolve, because this is not the end of the tunnel, okay, in terms of digital signature, but we have other things. First, I would like to define this conceptually. Experts in IT law and legislation sometimes confuse or misconstrue the creation of certain notions of the rule of law. We need to be very, very concrete, humbly speaking, or frankly speaking, especially throughout our checkered history in academia. We know that it depends on other objects or multidisciplinary tools in order to understand how these environments work. You need to become an IT lawyer understanding cybernetics and IT and digital rights for the digital signature. Why? Because most of the debate or discussion that is held in case law and at the legislature, when the decision makers pursue certain laws and how to implement them or execute them, they draw conclusions that sometimes are confusing, or sometimes we don't know how we're going to go through the enforcement and how electronic commerce is going to work, or how digital citizens are going to authenticate their papers. Let me remind you that all the level of signature and authentication is at the surface web, the surface layer. We're not going to delve into the dark web or the big web because not much has been done by lawyers. I'm not very pessimistic, but it's because it's a challenge ahead of us in order to understand these sort of environments and those surface layers. So first I'm going to address the surface layer of the web. So these documents or content as it is defined by e-commerce law and its enforcement allow us to speak of different tiers. We have the IT document that it could create an order or instructions, and then we have IT documents that how a computer integrated by circuits receive an order to automate a certain information to get the last tier of automation, in which we depend in order to create that automatization process, and we speak of when receive the instruction of turning on a computer, which may be essential for a process. We talk about a cybernetic document. I mean, there's evidence that somebody turned on some equipment or a piece of equipment and probably some data may have disappeared. In IT documents, we talked about automation. It could be of any trademark or any brand, but it's when you write your web processors could create basically an IT document and then the digital document. And to make headway, it depends on the internet to create that automatization. This is what we understand as the last two tiers when we address authentication of digital signatures. In this one, We have the Venn diagram that allows us to explain in the previous slide. That was kind of confusing, but that all cybernetic documents may result into some legal rights with these documents that allow automation and with the digital documents that eventually deserve some attention in terms of interconnectivity. When we talk about network process automation, so we build something similar, or a digital document that is cybernetic and IT, but not a cybernetic document is IT and digital document in terms of interoperability. What would happen with the regular signature, the longhand signature? You said that we have digital signatures, and most of these documents result out of the technology and the communications. But it's not that we disregard the traditional way of signing as we did, or we enter into contracts since the beginning of humanity. No, let me remind you that these documents tend to be changed because of the pandemic. Curiously enough, the Association of Internet, DMX, and together with the Mexican Internet users published over the last 3 years, as a benchmark, I use the 3 years, the peak of e-commerce and the peak of traffic of the average person or the average internet user. However, in 2019, where we did not know how the pandemic was going to, or how the pandemic was going to evolve, we reported the levels of 2017 and 18, and those were growth levels that we expected. However, as a result of the pandemic, with the results of 20 and 2021, we saw exponential growth that exacerbated internet consumption or use, because you have no 9.5 or 10 hours per day, and the growth or the increase of marketplace and e-commerce, so you have 114% increase. This leads us to think that I'm sure, what was the last time that you signed a contract in paper? If it's not that usual, you need to date back to the last time that you signed electronically any document. Every time you download an app, you're signing or entering into a contract that depends on a click. Let me remind you that you are signing contracts on and off. You had to download Zoom and you sign a contract of this kind. The same with ISPs, telephony services providers allow themselves to have other contracts. Even some courts and lawyers are speaking of the evidence through WhatsApp. So we need to change our mindsets and the way we are expressing our will of consent. It's not going to be longhand with the pen, paper and pen. So how I'm going to go about this? So you have digital signature. The model law of e-commerce is one of the 10 standards together with the digital signature law of the United Nations. I'm not going to address any structures because this depends on the next presentation that is going to be addressed by my teacher. Now, behind advanced electronic signature, there is legislation, procedure, and even paperwork, not to have the dependence of the longhand signature that could, or the written signature that could be substituted with the same powers as the traditional way of signing. So we are going to do anything that is technologically possible so we could have the same probatory effect in the electronic environment with some enhancements, with the fact that electronic signature, when it is advanced to get, unlike the other traditional way of signing, requires protocols, that is surveilled, is certified, depends on certifying entities, and this surveillance allow us to know ratings. For example, when you were sign any paper and you were not witnessing how they signed, you never knew if that person was the one that signed, because those papers were left at the reception desk, and then you saw some signs or a signature. However, with advanced electronic signature, I can rest assured that that is the signature, and you can basically counteract that legally that that was not the person that signed, and you should require legal experts, all of that, to argue otherwise. And here we start breaking down signature, or the concept of signature. We're speaking of digital signature, and if we study or analyze digital signature, you need to be careful with the number of documents that we have, especially translations from English into Spanish. Indeed, if you read with the electronic model law and the e-commerce law from the E-Commission of United Nations in English and Spanish, they have some variations that are fundamental in the legal system or in the legal translation with the legal Spanish. Why? Because there are some provisions, doctrine or platforms, that sometimes they confuse or mislead the reader, and the way that is implemented in one country is not implemented in another, so you may find many concepts that are not necessarily are synonyms. However, they are subject to consideration to the ones that we have on screen for understanding purposes. A simple electronic signature could cover everything unless we have authentication, user, and password that will allow us to meet principles and international standards, like, for example, the guidelines for the e-commerce law. With that simple signature, as long as I can make people believe that I Jaime and I credit that I Jaime, we can advance with that process without a third party intervening in authentication. So how can we evolve with this simple electronic signature, and how can we put it legally or sign it legally? It's fundamental to prevent lawsuits, and we want to know that we want to have the highest likelihood possible. Advanced signatures depend on certifying agencies that tell you, yeah, that person generally signed the paper, because before me or in witness were off. I have the necessary elements to prove the integrity, attribution, and accessibility not only of the signature but also of the document. And the advanced electronic signature changes our mindset traditionally, and advanced electronic signature has the same evidence value as the longhand signature. Some of the processes and in some of the cases, it may happen that people still have doubts about the advanced electronic signature because they're not used to it. That is why in some lawsuits we have advanced electronic signature, and sometimes probably they sign with a pen, as in a Mexican case. However, that advanced signature to be substituted or to be replaced, or even if they steal my passwords and access key, it requires intelligence or intel at the espionage level, very intricate or far from the truth. As it is perceived by the written signature. So that's why we have the difference between the written signature and the advanced signature. What our legislation provides at the regional level, at the international level, is to find this match. So it matches the legal probatory evidence that we're seeking. And we have an interesting figure, and this is different, next to the other signature, that is the digitized autograph signature. Some platforms use these digitized signatures, such as AdopSign, where you put some gibberish and that's it. Some licenses, some franchisees, some institutions, and some companies and regulatory entities allow this sort of signature to make progress with authentication with username and password, providing the requirements that are established for the simple electronic signature. So what is the legal value of this gibberish? Probably depends on the legislation, but it may be nil. But yeah, I see that there's a signature and you think that is valid. There are some companies said that if the consumer wants to know what the sign is like, we can show it to him. However, we need further authentication and biometrics, face scanning, hand scanning, and real-time recording when you are signing a document. Alfredo Reyes Krafft is one of the teachers or the mentors of these electronic signature platforms or electronic signature concepts. Let me consider these three requirements of admissibility. The e-commerce law speaks of legislation as standards, and some legislation transform them in admissibility requirements. And in here, I say this as something very simple. So when you're signing a document, if it complies with those requirements, and if it serves as an evidence in a law, so you need to credit that the method that you use for signing is legitimate. I mean, it's not that it needs to be hacked and then I need to analyze some binary code. No, it has to be simple, routine-like. So the attribution, the mechanism by which you're signing these sort of documents allow you to know who has signed the document, and then you need to care for blockchain technologies, because even before I trace back to some of the cases that try to combine blockchain with advanced signature, so we shouldn't be confused about simple electronic signatures with blockchain, and that would be the opposite. And then the opportunity or the chance to consult it, because if it's an internal document, you could check the identity of the other party, but I cannot even consult it, not even in the future. So if that cannot be consulted, then this process becomes useless. And here we have practical cases and where advanced electronic process becomes essential in favor or to benefit the citizen. In 2019, in many Mexican courts and around the world, I'm not speaking only of Latin America, basically they closed the curtain. We cannot provide you with a justice system because I run the risk of getting COVID-19. Some specialized electronic signatures, especially in federal courts, change that paradigm where you have the lawyer and the client in court. No, the justice system right now basically triggered the advanced electronic signature. So I take it to my heart. There's a case that is very close to me that happened in Mexico thanks to the online lawsuits and thanks to the advanced electronic signatures. We have cases that resonate across the world, like express divorces where both parties cannot stand each other. And then we have the pandemic to separate or divorce themselves. And they do everything online. But what happens if we have the children's rights? Thanks to the online system, they adopted a child, and as a result of the pandemic, would be still waiting for a hearing. So thanks to platforms like Zoom and online processes, basically they're reunited family members. Digital notary and notary electronic signature is a paradigm shift of what we have seen for notary publics in Latin America and the way they constituted this, because notary publics basically go to the act when everybody signed those deeds or documents. And it was very, very complex to change that mindset with this use of technologies. Fortunately, 2 months ago, we received the good news in Mexico, as in other countries, where they said that public notary will become electronic or digital. With the use of platforms and specialized signature, we are going to have notary publics without going to court or without going to the meeting. As we are still in pandemic, they are going to provide services. They can sign the document as well. This case is great. Some courts, some tribunals, respectfully saying so, they have the fear of disappearing thanks to the online dispute resolutions. It's like resolving conflict over the internet. In the e-commerce platforms, when you had a claim, what was the last time that you resorted to a lawyer that you had a problem with a request, with an order, and to start a lawsuit? When was the last time? It's not common because these mechanisms of dispute settlements works very well. So together with electronic advanced signatures, you have a way to start your own dispute instead of copyright, consumer rights, class actions, not to go to court, not to hire a lawyer. So basically they settle anything in the same platform, substituting lawyers or litigation. And they have this counsel, and in the best of the cases, ODR and electronic signature try to phase out right now the legal aspect of having a lawyer. And I would like to conclude with this. We need to think of the future because digital signature, advanced electronic signature, simple signature, or the longhand signature and digitized signature may seem means of today. However, they have been under analysis or scrutiny for some time, for a long time indeed. Probably we're faced with these mechanisms lately thanks to the result of the pandemic. However, as lawyers and as professionals or practitioners in the industry, we have the accountability in 2021 that is to look ahead, where these mechanisms of authentication may be obsolete. When we have contactless technologies in bars or restaurants with a credit card, basically they know who is going to order what and what account is going to be charged to. The University of England, the University of Spain, and UVA, and authentication chips that are being implemented in the rests or bracelets to pay rights, transportation, bills, or whatever. Also, hard biometrics, you can pay with the veins, not with the digital fingerprint, and that cannot be counterfeited 1 versus 1 million times. So advanced electronic signature is the hero, is the spearhead that will convince utility service providers and citizens to modify this. What would happen if tomorrow you could sign a contract with a smile, with an emoticon? It's like a smile to pay. And that already exists, and I would like to acknowledge also the South School of Internet Governance reminded you that know-how is useful as long as we share. I would like to acknowledge Olga, Patricia Hull, and Alfredo. Thanks a lot.
Muchas gracias, Jaime, a ti por compartir, como tú dices, ese conocimiento. Y como bien indicaba,
thank you, Jaime, for sharing your knowledge. And as you were saying, these validation mechanisms are present in our countries for many years, have been present. And in Panama, for example, this is from 2008, but it has started being used in our countries because of the public registry electronic signature. So the regulations exist in our countries, but sometimes are not applied, and some countries do not have the regulations. So this is what we're going to talk about with Alfredo Krafft to see which is the map of the electronic signature in the Latin American region and which situation we are facing. Thank you, Katiuska. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, and it's a great honor to have the opportunity to talk. Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Adrian. Jaime's presentation was very interesting, and my presentation is going to be kind of interactive, so I'm going to ask you to enter the next slide. And in this slide, what we are going to talk about is topics that have to do with electronic signature, but we're not going to restrict this to this topic alone. As Jaime mentioned, things that have to do with data messages and the different kind of signatures. I'm going to talk about the source, the target, and if I have a little bit of time, we are going to talk about the new regulations as regards electronic documents. That is a very interesting topic, and some new concepts such as smart data, smart contracts. In the next slide, we have to click many times. It's like 7 clicks, please. So, where do we want to go? What is our goal? UNCITRAL is the United Nations Commission for Development of International Trade Law. Within UNCITRAL, we have developed a working group for e-commerce. Within this group, there is an international convention and also 3 model regulations. One e-commerce model regulation that Jaime mentioned in several occasions, and model regulation for electronic documents. We also have an international convention as regards electronic contracts. Most of our regulations in Latin America are based or inspired by these model regulations. I can assure you that most have to do with the topics that we are going to mention in this presentation and are based or inspired by these. Why? Because as countries, it's better for us to be inspired by these model regulations, because this is going to open doors for e-commerce for us. More than 150 jurisdictions today have adopted these regulations, model regulations, by overlapping them with their legislation or by being inspired by this. Panama is one of the countries that have included in 2009, Mexico, Chile as well. And the last regulation, which is the one from El Salvador, where a regulation was passed and was also inspired by these model regulations that I mentioned. So we're going to start with a unifying element that is very interesting, because understanding these model regulations, we are going to be able to somehow understand what the legislations are showing us. In the next slide, I'm going to share this presentation, so don't worry. Another click. You can see that I like clicks. Okay, 3, and then 1 more, 4 more. In these model regulations, there's an important reference. This is connected to general principles that within a context are going to regulate it. The first one, as Jaime was saying, is Functional equivalence. What is functional equivalence? He was mentioning it, but I'm not sure if you know the concepts. Handwritten signature and electronic signature are different, are totally different, but both are used for the same purpose. So the function is equivalent. It is the same case for paper documents and electronic documents. In one, you are damaging the environment, and in the other one, you are not. These are two totally different things, but with the same functionality. They are used for the same thing. This is the only equivalence that they have. And what is interesting about this functional equivalence is to think, for example, can I have an electronic signature in a paper document? There are no limitations for that. There may be a possibility from a QR code or by a bidimensional model. We can perfectly include in a paper document an electronic signature, and that signature would be valid because of the functional equivalency. And the same the other way around. To a data message, I can include a handwritten signature. I can do that, and in that sense, we're going to talk about it a little bit later. As regards international compatibility, we need to start with a model that is going to allow compatibility in signatures. I don't necessarily have to use the same technology, but the technology that I'm going to use should be compatible. And I'm referring to the importance of having standards that would allow us to interact not in a single jurisdiction, but in all jurisdictions. The third one has to do with willingness autonomy. This is a legal principle. All the lawyers understand this perfectly. Is the willingness of parties, which is what is going to be the base of contracts. If I agree with Katiuska to consider as my signature a password or a key, that is going to be valid, but only for our legal agreements, not everywhere. And that is the operational advantage that an electronic signature, advanced electronic signature can offer. And finally, technological neutrality. This concept was developed in 2003 with an important convention in Costa Rica as regards technological neutrality. And in 2004, in the Internet Summit, this topic was specifically addressed. I cannot be forced to use a specific technology. So all these elements shed some light on this topic. The next slide, please. Here we can have an interesting difference. As I was mentioned, and as Jaime was mentioning, the handwritten signature, electronic signature, and advanced electronic signature or digital signature are different. An important issue is that handwritten signature is based on something that one single person can do. Handwritten, written by my own hand. So what I do have in front of me is what I'm signing. But in the case of electronic signature, it comes from an exchange of passwords and keys. And those keys and passwords can be stolen. And there is an important problem here. When I have a tangible good, if I stop seeing it, I know that I lost it. But with a key or a password, it's very difficult to be able to identify that I have already lost it. So in that case, it can be stolen, I can lose it. So that's why it's important to updating and renewing my passwords all the time. Advanced electronic signature or digital signature somehow uses a key that I only know, that is my access key, a device that I only have that has my password, and some biometry that is going to allow me or to allow the certifying authority to authenticate my identity, to validate it, so that third party can somehow have a reference that I am the person that is in front of him, and that they can have authentication of my identity. This password or key is what is going to be the base of this model. We not only need to keep that model, for example, accepting a digital signed document or an advanced electronic signature is going to imply accountability from the person that is receiving that signed document, because the person that is receiving it should verify if that electronic signature is included in a digital certificate that is valid and current and issued by an accredited provider of authentication. So many may think I have the signature, I have the signed document with the electronic signature, but what I need to do is to verify that. Next slide. Now I need 3 clicks. I really like clicks. We have electronic signature, digital signature, and handwritten signature. The handwritten signature may also be a signature in a data message by functional equivalence. This is very important. Thanks to the pandemic, some of the providers in Mexico and all over the world, I'm sure, you're going to see how the providers that I'm going to mention in the next slide are going to sound familiar for all of you. And they are using this model, a handwritten signature within a data message or a biometric signature. Let's talk a little bit about what we need and why it's important to validate it. Can I have another click, please? Okay, the first thing that we need to do, these are the providers, I'm sure that you know them, and that you have hired them. What they do is they use a handwritten signature model in an electronic device. The problem that we may have is that, first, who is going to require the signature and who are we going to establish this legal relationship with? It is very important to understand that the person that is requiring the signature needs to have a contract or evidence of a contract and a clause protecting data with the signature provider. So I need a contract that will release the signature owner to the need of resourcing to this. So it is important to mention that this intermediary is going to act on behalf of the person requiring the signature. If I do it on behalf of another person, of, for example, Katiuska's company, so it is very important to understand this. The third element is something that exceeds the standards established within the model regulation. Remember that there are three options. The first one is to sign with the handwritten signature in a cell phone or in their computer.
The second one would be an image. That image looks nice, and the other one would be the text in italics. A text in italics with your name, is that a signature? No, it's not a signature. Any person could have used this, and it may seem like a signature. Second, the idea of including an image in the document, is it a signature? That is an interesting thing. It's not inserting an object, and that could result in conflict because I could have copy-pasted that object and I could copy that in a document. So you need to have the certainty that the one that signs is going to sign with their own signature. That holography doesn't look like this because when I sign with my thumb, for example, on a screen, it's not gonna look nice, and it would never look like mine to the signature that where I have signed in my ID. But never mind. What happens is not the image, but precisely the beginning and the end of the trace and the depth and the breadth that I'm going to create. That is the important thing. And lastly, that is important to guarantee the integrity of that document. To guarantee the integrity of that document. How are we going to guarantee that? Well, in Mexico, there's certification provided by an integrity provider that can guarantee the integrity of the document that was signed, and we can do that using a document or a model like a timestamp. And by timestamping, we can guarantee that that text was never changed or amended. I'm sorry that I had to deep dive in this, but it was very important to clarify these schemes. It's not merely electronic signature, but autograph signature, especially including in a text. Having these characteristics is like a hybrid, and that is why it was so important in our countries, precisely because it doesn't require to have a digital certification, and you have to sign with your hand, basically, as you always signed. We have only 5 minutes. Okay. Let's address what is advanced electronic signature, another one. You have some characteristics and the use of a service certificate or certification provider that can guarantee the use of a digital certificate. I was about to conclude, but we have elements that are important that we should cover. In the United States, why these platforms in the United States, as I was saying, use this scheme of having the name in italics or the picture of your signature, and they have become legitimate because in the US, by merely having an intent constitutes an electronic signature. That is in line with the e-sign Act of the year 2000. In Canada, they follow the same trend. They had legal provisions that are very similar to the ones in America. However, the Canadian provisions are similar to ours because they are inspired in the model law. Yeah, another one, please. let's analyze the European Union. Another click here. Yeah, that was Canada. And finally, the European Union. In the European Union, we're going to have three things here. First, we are based on three directives. The one that traces back to 99, 2000, and the Hayes regulation, which establishes the possibility of signing electronically not only with an advanced electronic signature, but also a signature based on a renowned certificate and a qualified certificate or advanced electronic signature created mechanisms that are qualified in order to sign. And here we conclude the presentation of signatures and we can address the questions. We have some mechanisms and intelligent contracts, but I'm sure there will be questions that could ask or could address these topics. Thank you very much for your help. It's been a great honor being speaking here with us today, with you today. Thank you, Jaime. And thanks, Alfredo, for your participation and collaboration.
Con muchas luces de lo que efectivamente es la firma electrónica en cada una de nuestras latitudes.
Yes, give us an idea of electronic signature in our latitudes, the regulations and the guidelines proposed by the European Union, understanding that most of our regulations and standards in electronic signature emerge out of the UNCITRAL framework laws, and that's why we are referring to that model. Let's see if somebody can read the questions out loud. Yes, I have the questions from the students here. Yeah, a lot of attention, comments on how good the presentations were. Jaime, very, very good. And there are so many questions, but we have quite a few minutes left. Let's see if we can address them little by little. How to prevent fraud? They're all similar. I'm going to read them out loud. How to prevent fraud in electronic signature, considering the blockchain and smart contracts? Or do you consider that blockchain and smart contracts would be the beginning and the end of public notaries?
Muy bien, Jaime, muy bien, Jaime. Acá felicitaciones.
Jaime, congratulations. It's great to have this technological progress. This parliamentary power will come to the citizenry with the power of blockchain, or otherwise will be far from that reality. Excellent presentation. Great methodology. What are the advances made in advanced electronic signature in the region, and what are the limitations for these sort of signatures? During the pandemic, did you find these emergent solutions because of COVID-19? I'm learning a lot from Alfredo Reyes Krafft. Somebody says digital signature will always require middlemen. Apart from Mexico, what other uses can we have with other certificate providers in other countries? Model implemented in Latin America, is it inspired in American models or European ones? It's been a successful presentation because I can tell because of all the questions that were asked. We can take 5 minutes to take those questions if you want. If you give me the chance, I will refer to blockchain and smart contracts. To put it simply and to explain this simply, blockchain is a registrar or registration book, a registration log, which operates under certain guidelines or nodes. With miners, data miners, and stakeholders in blockchain. this is blockchain was coined like that because it comes out of a nickname of a group of scientists, and some say that it was a person. He created a white paper of Bitcoins, and that white paper they refer to the first specific reference to blockchain for a white paper to prevent the potential risk of fraud. Block consist of crypto assets, documents, smart contracts, whole set of assets, files saved in the cloud, or accounting records, identity records, medical records, consumption records, or any records whatsoever. This chain of blocks or records consists of a database in a non-distributable environment are located. So there's not a single point of control, and it has some essential elements: a node, a protocol standard, a network, and a distributed model. And it combines or converges with many technologies. One would be cryptography. That would be the technology underlying electronic signature, because of its main components of blockchain in order to authenticate the components between the parties. And the part of signatures is very important for transactions. And signature is subject to a hash code, and that needs to be encrypted with a private key that I own. So that model, that hash creation, the model of signature is one of the prime or fundamental elements for blockchain. This topic, so to speak, comes from an arbitrary block and creates or unleashes a chain of characters with output and identify that document as such. Regardless of this blockchain, miners, the consensus algorithm, the nodes, reinforce blockchain, and it's impossible to make changes in it. It's resilient to cyber attacks, so the miners cannot decentralize attack that, and is resilient to the copy. That's why Mr. Nakamoto, or the group of people, created it as a road or as a pathway where you may cross cryptocurrency, so to speak, and then blockchain. So what is a smart contract? A smart contract is an agreement where terms and conditions are translated into logics and mathematics, and these expressions indeed into a formula. This formula is connected to a robot that authenticates the source of the information and checks when the contract is resolved or signed. It validates that, and if the conditions are met, the contract is signed. And it doesn't require an attorney or a judge in order to resolve or to enforce that contract or to sign that contract. Imagine an airline company. If there's a consumption protection law, and if you have, in the event of 3 hours delay, you're going to have a reimbursement of 30%. That oracle, that is that robot that is verifying that these criteria are met when it authenticates the departure. And if it's a 3-hour delay, that contract is enforced, and then you get a 30% discount as a reimbursement. You're asking me if it's going to substitute notary publics. No, notary publics, as a matter of fact, make use or can make use of these tools, and is going to streamline work. Hopefully, I took all your questions. Jaime, any other questions or comments? Yeah, I cannot really elaborate after Alfredo's talk, but the use of blockchain technology, probably we can add some comments in connection with fighting against corruption. There are practical exercises in this endeavor. I recommend, I don't know if I have to say Bloco. In terms of technology, Bloco, especially in South Korea, eventually implemented follow-up technological processes or the necessary procedures with the criteria that Alfredo explained. And looking after at the municipal level, it's a small procedure, but they did this exercise at the electoral level in some regions. But at least they had 10,000 voters that basically issued their ballot or their vote in terms of blockchain. We need to be careful with the blockchain technology. Evidently, this has different tiers of study analysis in institutional level, academic, smart contracts, and there are some studies that reveal some of the risk of blockchain. But we need to be optimistic in terms of technology, and we need to give them a chance, especially to decentralized systems. And in connection with certificate providers in other countries, we need to be careful with that. We need to be careful because any country can issue their own rules instead of third-party certificates with their own rules, laws, and not in all cases an advanced electronic signature will be valid for Mexico and Panama, or a certificate provider that could serve in Panama would be useful or would be valid or legitimate in Mexico. As you're doing in the South School on Internet Governance in many companies, we have issues with approval, adopting to the modern e-commerce law and the advanced e-commerce law. That's why we're making the adequate efforts so at the preparatory level it could work. That is why we are wise to say that. It's not the same having an autograph signature or advanced electronic signature. I mean, the complexities that lie or underlie both signatures are different, but we need to find the equivalence that they will serve the same purpose. I mean, if you are faced with a certificate provider that complies with the rules, that apart from that, they adapt the approval of the modern e-commerce law, I could venture to say that what you're signing, along with the province of Panama, you will serve in Mexico, and when you sign in Mexico, it will be legal for Panama. So we need to be optimistic with technology and with these technologies of the future. 2 minutes. I totally agree with Jaime. But our countries within the Commerce Code, we have a rider for foreign certificate providers. Based on certain standards, we have the possibility to interact. I didn't know that you were going to continue with some comments. 2 more questions and then we're done. Okay. The functionality of hash, is it always present in electronic or digital signatures? Do Mexico and Panama have a model to train magistrates or judges in this field? Yes. That's a quick answer. Yes and yes. Any other comments on Panama?
Sí, bueno, efectivamente en Panamá se está trabajando mucho, como ya te
Effectively,
decía anteriormente, en el tema de la
in
aplicabilidad de la
Panama,
firma
we're using
electrónica.
on the
Aquí el
enforceability of
mismo
electronic
emisor de los
signatures.
certificadores
The same
es
issuer of
el
certificate
SEACA, es decir, el
providers are
Registro
the
Público de
CA
Panamá.
through
Se
our
está
public
iniciando todo
registrar
un
in Panama.
servicio de
And we're starting
digitalización
with a
de
service of
la estructura estatal
digitalization
y con
of
eso pues
the
se está llevando al uso
public
de la firma
apparatus.
digital
And
a todos los
then we're
servidores públicos.
taking the use of
Estamos a
electronic
espera que
digital
efectivamente
signature to
en el
public
órgano judicial
servers.
también
We're still looking
haya una
forward to
equivalencia
implement
en
this
esta
at the
usabilidad
judiciary
para que
of
efectivamente
enforceability or
podamos
usability,
responder a ese
so
sí
we
así rápido como lo
can
hizo Alfredo, que es
say
la hora de
yes
poder
as quick as
decisivo. En
Alfredo did.
Panamá todavía nos faltan dar unos
In
pasos
Panama, we
importantes
still
para
have
el uso óptimo de la
some
firma
time
electrónica en nuestro país.
to implement
Bueno,
electronic
gracias.
signature,
Y hay
but we're
una
working
razón
along
real.
these lines.
La pandemia nos ha ayudado muchísimo
And the
y
pandemic
la
has
propia
helped
ley
us.
habilita esa
And
posibilidad.
this
Lo
law
interesante
provides
es si se puede en el
for
terreno
this.
administrativo, pues
Let's see
habrá
if
que
the
formar a
administrative
los jueces
arena,
para que en su
well,
momento
if
lo
they can
puedan
do that, we
recibir
need to train the judges
pues esos documentos firmados
so they
electrónicamente
can
en una relación que
adopt
ejerció
these
administrativa le puedan dar valor
electronically
en el Poder
signed
Judicial.
files
Y por
and
eso
that
se
could
está
be valid
trabajando
at the
en
judiciary.
concierto de
And that's
naciones.
why we're working in the concert of
Bueno, no tengo
nations.
más que
Okay?
agradecerles a todos. Ha
Thanks a
sido
lot
súper
for joining
ilustrativo. Ya
us. It
vieron la
has
cantidad de
been
comentarios. Hay
very
algunos comentarios que hay que
explanatory.
brindar con
Thank you very
bastante
much.
tranquilidad. También puede ser
Uh,
compartida. Acá saludos.
Here they
Saludos
say
a
that
todos
they
ustedes.
are expecting you in the
Y bueno,
future
un
with
abrazo
some
aquí desde
tequila.
Argentina. Saludos de Adrián, que me
And
está haciendo
my
saludos. Y
greetings
toda la
for
familia
all of
acá
you from
de
Adrian
la,
and
de la
from the
South Sudan
students
Internet
and
Governance
from the
para
family of
ustedes.
the South School of
Un
Internet
afectuoso
Governance.
saludo desde acá. Gracias por su
Greetings to
tiempo.
all of
Gracias
you. Thanks
por
for
haber
your
compartido
time
sus
and thanks
conocimientos
for
y su
sharing
tiempo
your
con
know-how
nosotros. Gracias,
and your
Katiuska.
time
Un
with
abrazo,
us.
un abrazo, Jaime. Un abrazo, Alfredo. Saludos a
A
Cintia.
hug for you, Jaime.
Espero
Say
verlos
hi
aquí o allá
to
en algún momento
Cynthia,
del futuro cercano. Espero que
Alfredo.
sigan con buena salud.
In the near
Nos
future,
estaremos
hopefully,
viendo.
we're going to
Gracias
meet
por todo.
once again. Thank you very
Un
much.
abrazo fuerte, gracias.
Gracias.
Y gracias por la oportunidad.
Thank you.
Gracias a
Thank
ustedes.
you.
Gracias.
Chao.
Adiós. Y a nuestros queridos becarios,
Okay, let me tell you that in 20 minutes we will resume. We still have 3 presentations. I don't know if you remember the presentation addressed by ICANN-CO. Well, he mentioned other important organizations for internet infrastructure. One of that was the regional internet registries. Our regional read is LACNIC. If you are an ISP or if a ministry requires IP addresses, well, that is requested before LACNIC is the only one that can validate the identifiers and plays a key role. And LACNIC provides training, participatory spaces across Latin America, especially highly focused on technical aspects, IP policies, routing policies. Oscar is the CEO, Oscar Robles is LACNIC CEO, and later we're going to continue with 2 more panels. We will pick up in 17 minutes.